Thank you.
You guys can watch your video.
The deal on that was one of those.
He does. Oh my gosh.
Like this wedding. Tomorrow's going to get cool. But usually there's not all the way down. Yeah, that was. I have heard that from more times than me people Oh boy. Now I have to learn that. Well, tonight,
Good evening. Good evening. Welcome to the Grace Project. We're going to do things a little bit differently tonight. I mean, not majorly different, but just Jennifer's leading worship, and whoever's leading worship gets to plan the service. So she said we're doing it different. We're doing it different. So anyway, I'm going to do a few announcements, and then you guys are going to love on each other for a little bit, and then I'm actually going to preach first, and then we're going to sing after. Ooh, really shaking things up. All right. So if that weirds you out, you have about like 3 minutes to kind of get yourself together. All right. Or leave. Yeah, there's the door. Nobody's making you stay. So anyway, okay. So yeah, you have to stay. Touche. Okay. Two announcements. One is, so this summer on Wednesday nights, we have been doing, we just kind of had like a student hangout time here, where kids can just come and we just had pizza available and they just kind of had the run of the place. Now that the school year started, we were talking about, do we continue doing something? Do we put some substance into it or whatnot, or do we just discontinue? And what we decided to do is we're going to keep doing it, but rather than it just be a hangout, there is going to be a lesson discussion portion of it. And basically this is how it's going to work. It'll still start at 6. We'll have game time or whatever. We'll have the discussion time, and then the students can just hang out as long as they want afterwards. But what we're going to be doing is we are going to be using the book, The Red Letter Revolution. I always get tongue-tied when I say that, but I didn't this time. The Red Letter Revolution. It's by Shane Claiborne and Tony Campolo, as they just have discussions about certain issues and what Jesus has to say about it. Hence the red letter in your Bible. It's the words of Jesus. That's kind of the idea. So Paul's actually the one who recommended this book to me. And and each chapter is pretty short, and they're independent of each other, and it's just them talking about those issues. So students, we encourage you to come be a part. You don't have to read anything if you don't want to. However, what we'll do is each week we'll just say, hey, we're going to talk about this issue, this chapter, the next week. If you want to read the chapter, you can, but you don't have to. We're kind of, this came out of our retreat, our camp this summer, Zeteo, and in Zeteo, I always pretend like kids are going to read the books, but half the time they don't, and it goes fine. So if you want to read up on it, that you'll have that chapter. But if you just want to come and participate in the discussion, you can do that as well. There are some books over there, students. If you want to do it, just grab a book, and that would be totally fine. Okay. So there's that, and then also there's like a group me. I don't even understand how it works, but it's like a group chat room or whatever. And so. Isaac's laughing at me. If you want, we can put yourself on, you can be a part of that, and just so as we send out information, you're getting that. We put it on our Facebook page whenever we have announcements, but we know half you kids don't even check Facebook anymore because all the adults are on there, so you get to stay on other places. So, and that's fine. So there's that. And that's, in all honesty, we mostly have high schoolers in mind with that. But junior hires are welcome to be a part. Okay, just know that there might be times in the discussion where you feel like, "Ooh, this is low over my head," but that's okay. That's we still would love for you to be a part. There will probably be times when Ezra's sitting in on the discussion, and he's not even in junior high yet. He's kind of middle school age. There'll be times when he's sitting on the discussion. There'll be times when I'll be like, "Ezra, go play video games." He'll go, "Okay," and that will be no problem. So, and the second thing is this: on the 25th of this month, so the last Sunday of this month. They're doing the benefit dinner at First Christian Church for Taylor Mason, and we are not going to have service that night, okay? And so my encouragement to you is church is going to be at First Christian that night. Eat some spaghetti, bring your wallets, okay? That's the goal, and we're just going to love on her in that way. So anyway, if that's not enough church for you, still come anyway, and then you can get on YouTube and find the greatest preachers in the land, and then you'll think, why do I even go to church? I can just listen to these guys. So anyway, but that is something as well. But we want to show encouragement to her. We want to be praying for her. I don't know if you noticed, this is Taylor is Jeanette's great-granddaughter, right? So anyway, she's a neat kid. I don't know if you know her. She's just a really, really special kid, and we want to love on her well during this time, and just continue to pray that God is going to heal her and work in their lives. So, yeah, you want to say something?
Yeah. Thanks for your prayers, all of you. And she's done extremely well. It's just shocking to hear the doctors. And yesterday they gave her first blood transfusion. They gave her 2 of them. And then they took her blood and checked it, and they said there was no blood cells in her blood. But I don't know if that's anything to be real excited about.
Like no cancerous blood cells?
Cancer cells.
Okay.
I mean,
Okay. I figured there's some in there.
Anyway, she was dreading her chemo treatment after that, and she always throws up,
Sure.
and she slept all night.
Oh, wow.
And God is so good. He's so good to her, to all of us,
Sure.
And this city, it is wonderful. They're just wonderful. But I just don't have any doubt about her making it through this. I have no doubt. I have a calm feeling about it, and I think because of encouragement, and he's just let me be that way, and I'm excited.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing.
Thanks, Phil.
You're welcome. And we just want to continue to pray for we don't know how God's going to answer those prayers, but we know He's going to hear and He's going to answer, and we're just going to trust Him for the way He wants to answer and how He's going to answer. And I was just emailing with someone last week or the week before about not this specifically, but these types of things. And when I go to pray for things like this, I always pray trusting that God could bring healing like that, because He can, and we know that. But I also pray recognizing that He might not choose to work like that, and I'm going to trust Him in that. And it's hard to pray for both, but in both ways. But I think that's what we're called to biblically. And perhaps what you said right there, that test has been an indicator that He wants to do it in a miraculously and powerful way to bring glory to Himself. That would be amazing if that happens, and we'll pray, continue to pray that does.
Already been some things happen that I know God's got part of. And one thing, her father has really never, gone to church or anything, and he's really been praying and stuff like that. And some of the kids at the school, they say it really looked at, like she would go and lead the
It is. This is a heavy thing for the kids. So yeah, we should be praying also for the high school students
Yeah.
and the kids in our community, because this is a lot for them to process as well. So, let's just go ahead and pray for her just quickly right now, and then we're going to take some time to love on each other. Okay. God, we thank you for Taylor. Thank you for the joy that she brings to everyone she comes in contact with. Thank you for the ways that you've been working in her life for years, and we've seen that on so many levels. Thank you for the ways that you've used her to bless others. God, we don't understand why this is happening in her life. It doesn't make any sense to us, and yet we trust that you're in control. So God, we ask you to heal her. We ask you to heal her in a powerful, miraculous, and if possible, even immediate way. And we know that you can. And so we ask you to do that, and to do it in such a way that you get all the glory, that you get all the credit, that your kingdom is strengthened as a result. God, if you choose to work otherwise, help us to trust you through the process. Give us your peace, give us your strength, give us your comfort, and especially give those things to Taylor as she faces the challenges of each day. God, be with the students in our community as they have questions. God, I pray that they will find their answers in you, and you will use us to help walk them through this time. God, work through us and work in Taylor during this time, through this situation. Lord, we love you in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, go ahead and get up and love on each other just for a minute. Love, love, love. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Get moving. Oh, groaning already? Oh, goodness. All righty. As you get situated, go ahead and turn to Acts 17. Acts 17, starting in verse 16 is where we're going to be. First church Jennifer and I worked in right after we got married was the church in the south suburbs of Chicago. So there were actually two campuses. There was the main campus of Deer Creek Christian Church. The main campus was in University Park, and it was a church of about 800, something like that. And Jennifer was hired as a children's minister. But then they had started a second campus in the community of Chicago Heights, which is about 15 minutes away. And it was meeting in Bloom High School, which Bloom High School, the auditorium seats like 1,200, and there were like 100 of us. So we were like babies in a bathtub. It was pretty fun. So, and I was the music minister there. So, but even though there were two different campuses, we were really one church staff. We had staff meetings together. Our offices were in the same place. We drove to work together each day, which on one hand was like a lot of fun. That's why, the first year we worked there during homecoming week, she taught me the Marshall School fight song, because I guess she knew I would need to know it one day. But so we would drive to work together, which was fun, but it was also frustrating because she will sleep in as long as she can. There were literally mornings where I would just carry her out of bed and put her in the shower and turn the water on because she wouldn't get out of bed. It was driving me insane. We had to get to work, but anyway. So but when we were there, there was one. I think it was the first year we were there. Earl Ferguson, who was the senior pastor, got invited up to Michigan to preach at a revival at a church up there. And it was kind of one of these dealios where it started Sunday night and go to like Wednesday night. Okay. Well, he was going to preach, but they wanted him to bring a worship team as well. Excuse me, from the church, which sounds all fine and good, but since most of the musicians were just volunteers in the church, that's a little tricky because it was during a work week. Get that many people, ask them to take off work and whatnot. excuse me, that's just kind of a more difficult thing. So as they were trying to figure that out, it occurred to the ladies who were planning it that on our staff there were enough musicians, singers and instrumentalists, that we were able to form basically our own worship team. We only had to get one guy, the bass player, or one of the bass players, to take off work and join us, and he was more than happy to do so. And so we just kind of had this staff-wide worship team, which we'd never done that before, and we had so much fun doing it. But so we went up to Michigan, and we had services each evening, but the question was, what are you going to do during the day, right? Well, my thought was, like, this is like paid vacation time, It was just kind of like that I didn't know was coming. That's my thought for what we were going to be doing. And it kind of looked like, at first it looked like it was going to be like that. On Monday, I think we just kind of hung out and then met some people in their church, and we went to lunch at someone's house, and they made chicken squares. I don't know if you've ever had tasted Jennifer's chicken squares. She learned it there. They were amazing. And so my family is extremely thankful. They're really good. My family is extremely thankful that we learned that recipe, because that's one of my boys' favorites. And so that was Monday. Tuesday I was excited because we had all brought our golf clubs, and I had just started playing golf, and so we went golfing. I got my first par ever on that course. I still remember it was par 3, approach shot, landed right off the green, which was a miracle because I'm terrible at my approach shots, still am. But I chipped it right up next to the hole, put it in. It was a beautiful thing. I still have the book. Oh my gosh, I did like the Tiger Woods, it was just phenomenal. So anyway, it was so much fun. Well, then Wednesday was rolling around, and I didn't know of any definitive plan. So in my mind, it's like, hey, let's go golfing it. Like the guys had gone golfing, the ladies had gone shopping. I thought, man, let's do that again. We don't have anything else we need to do. Well, that's not what happened. Instead, we were told, hey, come to the church about 1 or something like that tomorrow. Oh, I'm like, okay. So we get to the church, and come to find out what has happened, what has transpired, is Earl has put together like this questionnaire, and he has organized it to where we're going to go out in these teams of 2 and 3 and basically canvass certain neighborhoods and go door to door knocking on people's houses and talking to them about Jesus and faith and church. And as he's describing this, I thought, you have got to be kidding me. I would rather get hit upside the head with a 2x4 right now than do this. I thought, oh my gosh, that is just not my personality, going door to door, and just kind of cold calling people. And I was like, oh, there's no way I can do this. But we did, and well, kind of. Jennifer and I knocked on like 2 or 3 doors, and then nobody was watching, and so we just kind of walked around the block a little bit until we saw the man show up, and then we jumped in. We're like, yeah, no, we really wanted to talk about stuff. So anyway, that's kind of what we did, which is, not really good. But I still remember that, and it was just a horribly unnerving feeling. And to be honest, I'm not so sure that going door to door in this day and age is kind of the best way to talk to people about Jesus. I mean, maybe a generation ago or a couple generations ago, but this day and age, people get it almost sends people running the other way. So maybe that's just a generational thing. Maybe that's just my personality. But nevertheless, I remember just one thing I appreciate so much about Earl, and we still see them periodically at the North American Christian Convention. He and his wife are just timeless. But what I appreciate about Earl so much is that wherever he is, whatever he's doing, he is looking at it through the lens of, what does God want to do in me right now? What does God want to do through me right now? What does God want to do with these people in this moment? How does he want to build his kingdom? And I love that about him. In fact, when we were there and when we were working at the church each year, he would usually organize a cruise. He and his wife, and they go on this Alaskan cruise, and anybody in the church could join them, and which was really a fun thing. But we would hear that even though as fun as the trip was, like every day he was trying to organize Bible studies and whatnot. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me! When I'm on a cruise, I want to sleep, I want to eat, I want to read, I want to watch movies. That's what I want to do. I want to walk by the dance floor and pretend like I'm going to go out there, but not actually do it. Just move a little bit so I look cool, but not actually do it. And that's what I want to do. I don't want to have Bible studies. I'll read my book, and it's usually something about Jesus or ministry or whatnot, but I don't want to do a Bible study. But that's just Earl. He was just like, whatever I'm doing, what's God want to do in this moment with what I'm doing, with who I am? And that's just the way he's wired. And to be honest, that's a stretch for most of us because most of us aren't wired that way. Most of us are like, I have my family life, and I have my work life, and I have my recreation life, and I have my free time life, and I have my relationships life, and my dating life, or marriage life, and and I have my Jesus life and my church life, and we kind of have all those in different boxes, right? And we just kind of those boxes don't really touch a lot of times, and we don't think about what Jesus has to say about all of those things and what he is doing and how he is present in all of those things. That's typically the way we function, and yet that's not God's desire for us. One of my favorite worship songs is the song Hosanna, and there is a line in the bridge. Let me see if I can remember this. I did this morning, and I usually don't sing off key, but I could not find the key, and it sounded really, really bad. In fact, I saw a guy in the front row go like that, and I thought, wow, that was really bad. But it's the part right in the middle. Break my heart for what breaks yours, everything I am for your kingdom's cause. As I walk from earth into eternity. Every time I sing that, it just gets me. Because especially the part where it says, everything I am for your kingdom's cause. Everything I am for your kingdom's cause. How do we become someone like that, where everything about us is laid at the feet of Jesus and say, Jesus, use me in whatever way you desire, in this moment, in this place, right now. What are you going to do in me and through me right now? Take me in every area of my life. How do we become someone like that? What does someone like that look like? And I think we see that in the passage that I want us to look at tonight. So let's take a look at it. Acts 17. We're going to start reading in verse 16, and we're actually going to take it in a couple chunks, okay? 3 different chunks. So let's just start with verse 16. We'll go a few verses, all right? Now, just set the stage. We're picking up right where we left off last week, which, again, isn't always the case. But where we left off last week, remember, Paul and his companions, Silas and Timothy, they were in Thessalonica. They got run out of Thessalonica, so they went to Berea. Berea really received them well, but the Thessalonian Jews came down to Berea and caused problems there too. So Paul, they brushed Paul out of the city, and they took him down to Athens. And basically the goal was he was going to wait there until Timothy and Silas could meet him there. That was the plan. I'm guessing they were just tying up some loose ends with the Bereans, and then they were going to join him. Okay? So that was the goal. That's the plan. All right? And that's where we're picking up verse 16.
17, 16?
Yes, I'm sorry. Acts chapter 17, verse 16. Yep, that's it. While Paul was waiting for them in Athens, he was deeply distressed to see that the city was full of idols. And so he argued in the synagogue with the Jews and devout persons, and also in the marketplace every day with those who happened to be there. Also some Epicurean and Stoic philosophers debated with him. Some said, "What does this babbler want to say?" And others said, "He seems to be a proclaimer of foreign divinities." This is because he was telling the good news about Jesus and the resurrection. And so they took him and brought him to the Areopagus and asked him, "May we know what this new teaching is that you are presenting? It sounds rather strange to us, so we would like to know what it means." Now all of the Athenians and the foreigners living there would spend their time in nothing but telling or hearing something new. It's kind of an interesting picture of the Athenians. They just like to sit around and talk about new ideas, which kind of, you get that picture sometimes with philosophical types, right? They just like to sit around talking about stuff. Okay, so starting with this, what I want us to do is just kind of look at how Paul functions in this, to just kind of take a cue off of how we see him functioning, to get a picture of how we are supposed to be as people, where everything we are is submitted to his kingdom's cause. Everything we are laid at the feet of Jesus, so that Jesus can do what he wants with it. And Paul, I think, is an example of what that looks like, okay? And so one thing I think we see right here in the life of Paul that needs to be true of us is we need to be troubled by the brokenness of the world around us. We need to be troubled by the brokenness of the world around us. If you look at Paul, so he's in this city, and he's just there waiting, and he starts noticing how many other gods are worshipped there, how many other divinities, how many other temples, how many other altars, how many other, all these different philosophies, all these different religions, and it bothers him, it grieves him. Literally what it says is it irritated him in his spirit, like down deep. It just really troubled him to see that. And I think the starting point for us as people at the service of Christ, for whatever wants to do, is we have to get to the point where when we see the brokenness of the world around us, it truly bothers us. And to be honest, I'm not always like that. A lot of times it's like, you do your thing, I'll do my thing. I think you're wrong, but whatever. That's kind of our attitude, especially my generation and younger. Whatever, whatevs, right? That's just kind of the way we think. You do your thing, I'll do my thing. Just don't bother me with. And that wasn't Paul. In fact, a lot of times this passage, when people come to visit the chapel and the prison, they'll refer to this story in this passage. Because when you come into the chapel, there are all these lockers, and it has and each locker is assigned to a different faith group. And so you see Moorish Science Temple, Nation of Islam, Muslim, Wiccan, Santeria, Asatru, and they'll see others, and they're like, what the heck are these? And oftentimes it's like, what's that one? What's that one? And so I'll try to explain a little bit I know. But oftentimes they'll say, it makes me think of that passage when Paul was in Athens, and he looked around and he was so troubled by that. I'll be honest, I walk by those lockers every day, and I don't get troubled by it. I think they're goofy. I think they're wrong, but I just like, whatever. If you want to be wrong, it's your federally protected right to be wrong. So you go and do your thing. But that wasn't Paul. He was troubled by the brokenness of the world around, whether they were worshiping the wrong things or just a city that was not being who it's supposed to be. It troubled him in his spirit. Which then led him to the next thing, is we need to be looking for ways to make a difference. Paul didn't just get troubled. He thought, okay, I need to get busy. I need to do something. So the first thing we see is we see him go into the synagogue and he starts debating with the Jews there. And, at first glance, it's like, well, that's what Paul always does. But again, keep in mind, he wasn't supposed to be there. Like, that wasn't the plan. All he's doing is waiting for his friends there. And he's by himself. He's not with his normal ministry team. He's just supposed to be chilling, waiting for them to show up. And yet he's thinking, I'm here. There's a need. I'm going to get busy. And so he starts debating with the Jews in the synagogue, but he doesn't keep it there. He goes out into the street because Athens was a place of philosophy. It's the birthplace of Aristotle and of Socrates and Plato and the ancient classical Greek philosophy, and they were known for that. And the residents loved to talk about new ideas. He's like, okay, and so he got right out into the street, and it said that he would talk with each day he would talk with whoever happened to be walking by. Which, if I was there, that wouldn't be me. I'd be going and visiting the Parthenon. I'd be buying a chess set. That's what I would be doing. But he wasn't sightseeing. He was working. He was looking for ways that God could use him there. And he does that because that's what God's calling him to be. He's not content to see he's not content to just let things be. He's like, God, what could you want to do in me and through me in this situation? A preacher that I heard on one occasion, he came and did a revival action when we were up at Deer Creek. His name was Dean Troon. He did college campus ministry for years. And he would do a lot of teaching about like spiritual disciplines, prayer, and seeking God's will for situations. And one of the things he would talk about was he called them divine appointments, when God just kind of orchestrates your steps to where you just kind of rub shoulders with someone that you didn't plan on, and God uses that encounter to make a difference in their life or in yours. And he had all these neat stories of the way God had just brought him to get together, and he had neat life-changing conversations with waiters and waitresses and people that he happened to be sitting next to waiting for the bus. And he had all these neat stories of people that he would happen to be sitting next to on an airplane. And just neat conversations that came from that. And I would hear those stories and I just think, oh, that is so cool. And all of it sounded so good to me, except for the airplane one. To be honest, like every time I get on an airplane, I just think, if Dean Troon was here, he would be praying for God to set him next to someone who needed Jesus. And all I'm praying for is, God, please let me sit next to someone who doesn't want to talk Because I don't want to talk to anyone. I don't want to rub shoulders. I want to do two things on an airplane. What do I want to do on an airplane? Sleep and read. That's what I want to do. I don't want to deal with my kids. I don't want to eat. I want to read my book, and I want to sleep. In fact, I can remember we were coming back from Haiti, and I was so tired. It was from a mission trip in Haiti, and I was so tired that I didn't remember falling asleep. All I remember is when the plane was starting to land, I started to stir. And I guess while I was sleeping, my head had rolled over onto the shoulder of the dude sitting next to me, who was not in our group. And it was kind of one of these moments where I was like, oh my gosh, I am so sorry. And he just looked at me, he's like, it's all right, I've been there, I totally understand. But I don't know how long, I don't know if I drooled on his shirt, I don't know. But that's me, I don't want to be disturbed. And yet, what I respect so much about Dean Troon is it was the same thing. It was like, God, how do you want to use me in this moment? And that's what we see in Paul. He could be resting. He could be taking it easy. He's had a rough go of it in Thessalonica and Berea and who knows where else. And he's been doing a lot of work. He could be just taking this time to kind of catch up on his sleep. And yet he's going it alone saying, God, how can you use me in this moment and in this place? Well, let's keep reading. Verses 22 through 31. So Paul gets invited to speak up on the Areopagus. And by the way, the Areopagus, it's also called Mars Hill. It was a hill outside of Athens, and it's where kind of the philosophers would gather to talk about things, kind of an official philosophical gathering. So he's invited to address the community, so to speak. So it says, then Paul stood in front of the Areopagus, and he said, Athenians, I see how extremely religious you are in every way. For as I went through the city and looked carefully at the objects of your worship, I found among them an altar with the inscription, to an unknown God. What therefore you worship as unknown, this I proclaim to you. The God who made the world and everything in it, he who is Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in shrines made by human hands, nor is he served by human hands as though he needed anything, since he himself gives to all mortals life and breath and all things. From one ancestor he made all nations to inhabit the whole earth. He allotted the times of their existence and the boundaries of the places where they would live, so that they would search for God and perhaps grope for him. I love that phrase. And find him, though indeed he is not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being, as even some of your own poets have said, for we too are his offspring. Since we are God's offspring, we ought not to think that the deity is like gold or silver or stone, an image formed by the art and imagination of mortals. While God has overlooked the times of human ignorance, now he commands all people everywhere to repent, because he has fixed a day on which he will have the world judged in righteousness by a man whom he has appointed. And of this he has given assurance to all by raising him from the dead. So as we look at Paul start to communicate with them, we get more ideas of how we need to be if we're going to be this kind of everything we are for your kingdom's cause. And what we see Paul doing is, and as a challenge to us, is we need to connect with the people that we're trying to love, to minister to. We need to connect with them, the people we're trying to communicate to. When I did my internship, there's a Chapel Rock Christian Church in Indy. There were 2 interns that summer, and the youth minister that had already hired one, and it was a kid that he knew, and he really liked this kid, and he just needed someone else, so it was kind of a cold call situation when we got set up. And I still remember him talking to me over the phone. And now this is a church at that time, and I don't know if it's still the case, but they had a lot of inner city kids and whatnot. And he was just asking me kind of things that I'm into and whatnot. Well, I went to Milligan, and I was kind of a nerd, and not what most inner city kids are into. And so I'm telling him the things I'm excited about, and I could hear it kind of, okay, And then he asked, what kind of music do you like? And I wasn't even thinking, I was a music major at that time, so I would, my listening choices consisted mostly of like contemporary Christian worship stuff and classical music. And I like all kinds of music, and so, but those were the 2 I was listening to. I was like, well, I like contemporary Christian music, and I like a lot of classical music. And I could just hear the phone get silent. I thought, oh my gosh, I did not sell myself well on that one. But nevertheless, he hired me, and I know, and he told me later, he thought, this kid, I'd just give him a bunch of administrative work and not let him near the kids. He's not going to be good. And but the summer turned out really well. And one of the things that happened was when I got there, a lot of these kids were skater kids. They were into skating. And I thought, when in Rome. And so I learned to skate that summer. So I bought a pair of rollerblades, and I learned to do a half pipe, and I learned to do a spine ramp. I couldn't do any tricks. I could just kind of go back and forth and whatnot. I learned to jump the ramps and go up the vertical wall and and which was so much fun. I had the skin on my hip was literally rubbed off because I'd fallen so many times, and for some reason I always fell on that side. But it just rubbed the skin off because I skated so much that summer. But the cool thing was when I got up to talk to those kids, they listened because I had connected with them. I had become a part of them. And we see Paul doing that here. We don't see him talking to them like a Jewish Pharisee turned Christian. We see him trying to make connection with them to show how what he's about and what they're about is very similar, that they're seeking after the God that they want to know. And so he makes reference to I even saw, he saw on altars to the unknown God. And there was actually a cult it was kind of this kind of agnostic cult. And he made reference to that. He said, you guys have been you're worshiping a God, some of you worshiping a God that you don't know. I can help you with that. I know who he is. He tries to make a connection with them. In 1 Corinthians 9:22, Paul says, I have become all things to all people that I might by all means save some. He says, to the Jews, I became a Jew. To the Gentiles, I became a Gentile. What he's saying is, I'm not being two-faced. It's I'm going to look for ways to connect with them so that they'll hear me, so that they'll listen. And we see him doing that here. We see him working hard to find common ground so that they'll listen to him. Jennifer, many of you know Jeff Knoll, who used to minister at First Christian Church years ago. One of the things that Jennifer said that I remember that she said that she loved about Jeff is he can talk about anything. Like he knows a little bit about everything. Now, if he was here, he would say, yeah, but I don't know a lot about anything. That's probably what he'd say, which is not true. But the fun thing about Jeff is you want to talk baseball, he can talk baseball. You want to talk football, he can talk football. You want to talk about guns, he can talk about guns. You talk about fishing, he can talk fishing. You want to talk about tractors, he can talk about tractors. You talk about horses, he'll talk horses. Dogs, dogs. I mean, computers. I mean, he knows a little bit about everything. But that's why he's such a good minister, because God uses that to establish that common ground so he can connect with people when they find out, okay, this guy who's running after Jesus, he's not so different than me. Maybe that can be true of me as well. And we see Paul doing that here, working hard to connect with them. But he doesn't just connect with them. We need to speak the truth in language that they can understand. We need to speak the truth in language they can understand. And we see Paul doing that here. If you read this, if you study his brief message here, which in reality, to be honest, this is probably just a summary of what he said. For one, that's just something they commonly did in ancient manuscripts. They would just kind of summarize something. Two, from what we know of Paul, I mean, a few chapters later, which we're not going to talk about this one, he actually preaches and teaches so long into the night that a guy falls out of a window and falls asleep and falls out of the window. I mean, Paul, with his one big chance in front of the Areopagus, he's not going to reduce it down to like 45 seconds. That's not Paul. So this is probably a summary. But if you study it, it's a thoroughly Jewish, biblical message with ideas that if you study the Old Testament scriptures, you will be taught. And yet he doesn't put it in those terms. He puts it in Greek philosophical terms that would make sense to them. In fact, he quotes two of their poets, two of their philosopher poets that they would recognize, and says, you know what these guys were talking about, that's true of what I'm trying to communicate as well. And so he speaks the truth to them, but he does it in a language they can understand. And we have to learn to do that too. We can't sound so Christianese. We can't sound like that we don't speak the common day language. A lot of times we have our church talk and our regular talk. And Jesus wouldn't be like that. He would talk about God in regular talk. That's what he would do. And that's what we see Paul doing here as well. But at the same time, Paul does not back away from speaking the truth. Because when he talks about the resurrection, we're going to see this here in a second, they scoff at him. They sneer at him. They're like, that's ridiculous. He could have very easily backed off that. But he presents that truth to them, even though he knows they're not going to receive it well. But he does it in terms that they can understand. We need to speak in language people can understand. Karl Barth, a German theologian, he would say that you need to read the Bible and you need to read the newspaper. That's what he said. He said, but just make sure you interpret your newspaper by the Bible, is what he would say. He would say, preach the Bible, preach with the Bible in one hand and your newspaper in the other. I mean, that was the idea. And he's on to something there. That needs to be true of us. And we see Paul doing that here. Okay, let's keep reading. Verses 32 to 34, last little bit. When they heard of the resurrection of the dead, some scoffed or sneered. But others said, "We will hear you again about this." At that point, Paul left them. But some of them joined him and became believers, including Dionysius the Areopagite and a woman named Damaris, and others with them. So, as we talk about what it means to be our lives, to be submitted to God's will for whatever he wants to do to us, I think one of the things that we see in this passage that we need to do is we need to lower our expectations. We need to lower our expectation. Not because God can't do exceedingly and abundantly more than we ask or imagine. We know he can. But sometimes he doesn't. And to me, one of the challenges of Acts is when I read Acts, I read the first couple chapters and I see 3,000 coming to Christ and I see 2,000 coming to Christ. And I'm like, why doesn't that ever happen when I preach? Or why doesn't that ever happen when, my friend who's on the mission field in Africa in a Muslim country, why is he struggling just for 1 or 2 converts here or there? Well, there's a real good reason for that. And one of the reasons is that because in the first couple of chapters, Peter's preaching to a crowd full of Jews, right? I mean, most of those guys had like half the Old Testament memorized by the time they were 12. They lived their lives trying to understand the things of God. They had a thoroughly Jewish mindset. And all that happened then was Peter, in the first couple of chapters of Acts, comes along with the message of the capstone Jesus, the Messiah, and he puts that into place, and boom, everything makes sense. And bam, you see all these people coming to Christ. And not everyone does, but they already, that groundwork had already been laid. But here, where we're in the philosophical center of the universe at this point, no. I mean, they're scoffing. They're sneering. There's hardly anyone that comes forward. And yet, God can still use us in that. So sometimes we just need to recognize, hey, it's not about the results I want. It's whether I'm being faithful to what God's called me to do. And really, that's the last thing, is we need to learn to be faithful no matter what the results. We need to learn to trust that God is going to use us as exactly how he sees fit. And just trust him for the results, whatever they are. The 2 converts mentioned here is a woman named Damaris and then a guy named Dionysius. Eusebius, who is a 3rd and 4th century Christian historian, in his work, he says that Dionysius, this guy mentioned here, became the first bishop of the Church of Athens. So this guy who came forward, kind of, one of 2 converts that day, becomes the Christian leader of the church in that city as that church starts to get formed. He was probably the one that led half those people to Christ as God used him. If Paul had evaluated just by numbers, it'd be like, man, this is a failure. And yet God used one of the ones who came forward in an amazing way. When we were at the North American Christian Convention, we got to hear Tim Tebow speak, which was a lot of fun. Ezra was coming out of his skin when he got Tim Tebow up there. It was nice. Tim Tebow is a large man. I will say that. Oh my gosh, he is huge. It was hysterical seeing him stand next to Dave Stone, who was like skinny as a rail. In fact, Dave Stone at one point said, "Let's roll up your sleeves. Let's compare arms." And Tim Tebow goes, #awkward. So anyway, towards the end of his sermon time, they were overtime, kind of like we usually are, and they were trying to get him to stop talking, kind of like probably some of you wish you could do to me. And Tim Tebow, they just couldn't shut him down. They could not get him to stop talking, which was hysterical. But the last thing he said was he told this story about a gentleman who used to be the president of Youth for Christ, and he felt led to do a revival at this town in India, and there was kind of this big to do and whatnot, and he really believed God was leading him to do that, and so he did this revival, and throughout the whole revival, only one person, well, maybe not the whole revival, but on this one particular night, only one person came down and gave his life to Christ. He was like, "What's up with this, God? I thought you wanted me to do this." But that one person was Ravi Zacharias, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but he is like kind of the premier Christian apologist of our century. The dude is a beast. If you're ever listening to Christian radio and you're hearing someone really smart with an Indian accent talking, that's Ravi Zacharias, because I don't think there's many others out there doing that stuff, doing that kind of work. He is an amazing man, and yet he came to Christ at that revival. And Ravi Zacharias even says he didn't even want to be there. The only reason he came was because he found out there was going to be snacks. I mean, he was, in his own words, he said he was totally into cricket. His whole life centered around cricket. But his sister talked him into coming. She said there was going to be food there. He's like, all right, I'll come. I like food. And that's why he came. And he ended up giving his life to Christ. And God has used him in powerful, powerful ways. What if that president had said no? What if he evaluated it based on just the results and saw that just through the lens of his own human understanding? He might have missed what the amazing thing God was doing. Because even though that gentleman only led one person to Christ, yeah, he just needed to make his entrance, you know. Even though that gentleman only led one person to Christ, Ravi Zacharias has impacted generations of Christians with the gospel. So what is God's message to us in all this? What do we need to do with this? To be honest, I think that's a question. Really, the answer is going to be different for each one of us. Because the question is, the challenge, I believe, of this passage is, how can I be someone where my whole life, everything I am is for your kingdom's cause? How do I become that type of person? And because I think we see that here in Paul. I think he exemplifies that in this passage. To me, that's the challenge of this passage, is how can I be that type of person where everything I am is for your kingdom's cause? And so the challenge for us individually is, what in your life has not come under his lordship in that way? What in your life, if you were to say everything I am for your kingdom's cause, you'd have a little PS on the end, well, I know this isn't for your kingdom's cause yet. I know this isn't for your kingdom's cause at the moment. And I know it should be. I'm not sure what to do about that, but I know at this point, everything for your kingdom's cause except for this and this, not so much. And the question is, what is those things in your life? What are those things in your life where God isn't quite Lord yet? Where there's pockets of your life where you just think, okay, when I'm in this zone, when I'm in this box, I'm just kind of doing my thing, and I'll check back in with Jesus later. Where is that for you? And what is he calling you to change? What is he wanting to be Lord of that he isn't yet? Maybe he wants to be Lord of your friendships. Maybe he wants to be Lord of the way you treat that kid at school that is so annoying that you just want to do that to them. Maybe he wants to be Lord of how you conduct your job. And that was a favorite thing of my dad. That he would always talk about, that God needs people in all different professions, not just ministers. And that was a big thing for my dad and shaped me as a kid. How is God wanting to use you in your workplace? How is God wanting to use you in your family? How is God wanting to use you to bring his kingdom into your friendships, into your relationships, into your marriage, into the way you spend your money, into who you rub shoulders with? How is God wanting to be in charge of those things? How is he wanting to use you in those situations and circumstances? Right there, right now, in you and through you, to where everything you are is for his kingdom's cause. What needs to change in you so that is true in your life? My encouragement and my challenge to you is that as we worship, that you'll be wrestling with that you'll be processing that as we come before God and come before his throne. Let's pray. God, I want so much for your name to be made holy, for your kingdom to come, for your will to be done in my life, in the life of my family, in the lives of the people gathered here, in the life of our community. And I pray that would take place. And I pray that you would show us what part we're supposed to play in that. How you want to use us in the different areas of our lives. And God, I pray that you'll show us the parts of our lives that we have not allowed to come under your lordship. That it would not be true for us if we tried to say everything I am for your kingdom's cause, because that part of our life isn't dedicated to your cause yet. And I pray that you'll show us what that looks like. You'll show us the changes that you want each of us to make, and that you'll help us through the power of your Spirit working in us to get busy making those changes. God, we love you in Jesus' name. Amen.
times when my heart is stirred and convicted, I really love to just mark that conviction and write it down or keep some sort of track of it, because tomorrow I will forget the ways my heart was stirred this evening. And so I would just invite you, if you have a journal and that's something that you write in, to grab that. If you don't, get your cell phone and open up like a text to yourself or your notes feature. You can go ahead and do that right now. I will. Or you can send text or check Facebook, and I'll think that you're doing what I'm saying, and that's fine too. But grab a journal or your cell phone, and I'm just going to play for a little bit, and I just invite you to use this time to kind of draw a line in the sand, to make a record, to write it down, to make note of it to yourself. What is it that God pricked in your heart tonight? Where is it that when you say everything I am for your kingdom's cause, there's a little nag there because you totally know that while you'd like to think and pretend and tell yourself that it's everything, there's stuff that doesn't get included in that everything. So just use this time to write down any ways that you feel like God is trying to say to you, hey, this is something I want to work on, and I love you. Without you ever working on it, I'll totally continue to love you. But I think we can do better. Just make a record of that right now. hear us and that you answer. And God, we want to be people who are looking and watching for you to work and who expect you to work in our lives when we ask. And we're excited to see what you're going to do as we have been just convicted about new ways or maybe old ways that we continue to not surrender to you. And God, we want to, because we want to see your goodness and we want to allow you to work in our lives in new ways. In Jesus' name, amen. As we sing this next song, just this will be our time of communion. And so if you're near a communion tray, if you could just send it roaming as we start singing. Take it as it comes, and you can take it when you choose. You can pray the whole time. You can stand and sing. You can sit and sing. Let's just kind of be a community amongst each other as we commune with the Father, but also with each other during this time. So if you would just go ahead and start those trays moving and take it as you choose to. can't do this without you. And we're grateful for all that you are and all that you do in our lives. We're grateful for your presence in each of our lives and your presence here with us. We're grateful for your word and the way you make it available to us. You're not a God who's unknown, but you can be known, and we're grateful for that tonight. God, we want to be who you called us to be in each moment, not in a judgy, legalistic way, but in a grace-filled, joyful way. Make us that. In Jesus' name, amen. Have a great week.
Here, I'll take your cup. Sure. Oh, that's my cup.
You're welcome.